Hey guys, it's Will from Tested.
And it's Norm from Tested.
Norm, tablet season.
Yes, the big tablet from Apple is out this year. When I say big, not just notable, but also the physically larger tablet from Apple. The new iPad.
By now, both of the new iPads are out, the Mini Retina and the iPad Air. The iPad Air was a pretty big surprise, though, it seemed like. We knew that something was coming, but
I think the biggest surprise in the iPad Air was probably its naming scheme, calling it the Air.
Calling the big one the Air when on the laptops the small one is the Air? It doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense.
Crazy.
What I have in front of me laid out are every form factor the full iPad has ever been released in. We got the original iPad, which was released in March 2010.
It looked so small then, and it's so big now.
I don't know if it really looked so small then. Let me tell you a secret. It looks small only because in the marketing angles, they showed this thickness.
There's an invisible hump.
But the big hump, oh my God, the iPad.
It's not that big of a hump. But yes.
Half its thickness was in the
hump. We took that thing apart. It's all battery in there. There's a lot of battery inside
and then,
that guy.
Of course, March 2011 was the iPad 2, reduction in thickness and weight, but the same size, same resolution screen. And you bought the iPad Air, iPad 2.
I think that might be my favorite iPad.
It's still sold today. You could still buy one for today for $400. It is a great point-of-sale device, maybe even for museums as well.
Should anyone buy an iPad Air, Norm?
iPad 2.
iPad 2 that's not...
no.
Yeah, if you're buying it for yourself...
If you're buying it for yourself, you should not be buying the iPad 2.
Don't buy an iPad 2.
Absolutely not. There's so many better options. Of course, a lot of people then jumped on, including myself, the iPad 3, which was in 2012, March also.
So this was the first Retina
This was the first Retina one. It was incredible that Apple was able to pack, at that time, that screen into this device, but to be able to do that, had to put in a bigger battery.
So it was heavier. It had kind of an underpowered CPU in retrospect. Now looking back on what came just 6 or 8 months later.
A5X, so it was in the iPhone 4S.
Right.
But
it's a lot of pixels. A lot of pixels for the A5X.
But that screen was gorgeous, and to accommodate the screen, they needed a big battery. So that's why this had to be thicker and heavier than the iPad 2. Of course, infamously, 6 months later, they refreshed the iPad 3 and released the iPad 4, almost exactly the same, except a newer processor.
Same body, but different innards.
A6X, and also had the lightning cable connector, so 30-pin was outdated by then. And then just this year, just a month ago, was the announcement and release of the iPad Air. Oh my God, it's so light.
So so in terms of weight, can you put them in weight order for us?
Yes, absolutely. I'll go from heaviest to lightest.
That's where we want to start.
All right, the heaviest was the iPad
OG.
original, a pound and a half.
That's a lot of
notably a pound and a half because many tablets that came out after it, for example, HP's, their tablet, and even the Surface, also a pound and a half. So
it's still pretty standard.
Still pretty standard weight for a full-size tablet.
But it's very definitely a two-handed device.
It is absolutely two-handed, and we knew it back then. We know it now. You're not going to use this with one hand, even though I'm holding it right now with one hand. You could see it's being strained. Right there.
Just hold it straight out the side of your arm for as long as you can hold it, Norm.
That would be longer than YouTube could host this video.
Okay.
Then the iPad 3.
Okay.
1.43 pounds.
And 3 and 4 weighed about the same, right?
Almost exactly the same. And of course, with all the current iPads, the LTE version weighs slightly more. This is the LTE version, so it's the heaviest of the iPad 3 and 4s. You know what? I'm still comfortable with this. Still two-handed device. Still has the full bezel. And iPad 2 was lighter, a little over a pound.
This is actually almost a one-handable device.
Almost.
Almost. The problem with it is not in the weight; it's in the way where you can grip it. So you can't.
I'm just waving it.
It puts uncomfortable stress on your hand no matter where you grip it because it's so large and the weight's distributed across the whole thing.
Sure, and the way I'm holding it and the way most people hold it is to kind of cut the corner.
Yeah.
But the iPad Air now, while not literally as light as Air, is almost exactly 1 pound. 469 grams.
So it's still the same size screen as all the other full-size iPads.
9.7-inch screen.
It's a double resolution, so it's 1024 by 768 times 2, which is 2560 by 1600?
2048 by 1536.
There we go. Math's hard.
But it is lighter. So the reason this is lighter is physically it is smaller. And we'll talk about the physical form in just a second. But mostly it's because the battery large part of the battery is removed.
So less battery, but does that impact battery life?
We'll talk about battery life. No, it doesn't.
Okay.
In the iPad 2, we had a 25 watt-hour battery. In the iPad 3, we had a massive 42.5 watt-hour battery. Okay. That's nearing the 45 watt-hour battery that's in like a MacBook Air, 11-inch.
Yeah.
In the iPad Air, what we have is shaving off 10 watt-hours, and of course battery efficiency is a little bit better now, but a 32 watt-hour battery. So somewhere in between the 2 and the 3, but you still needed over 30 watt-hours of battery to power this screen.
So Apple was able to shave battery off, make it smaller, save some weight, keep the battery life the same. This is because it has the A7 in it?
Partly because of the A7. So we're talking about a new system on a chip, and we'll talk about the speeds of that in just a second. So it's a little more power efficient. It has better graphics, so it doesn't draw as much power as it's rendering graphics. It does use a lot of power when it's playing graphically heavy games, of which it is more capable.
Like anything.
Like anything. But the biggest power consumption of any of these type of tablets is the backlight. So these are LCD tablets, not AMOLED tablets. So there's one big backlight in the back that's shining through this grid of this IPS
It's like
LCD.
a screen door that filters light on a pixel by pixel basis.
Yes, and within the screen door are little LED transistors.
Subpixels.
Sure. And the backlight does not need to be as power hungry in the iPad Air because of the new manufacturing type of this screen. So it's a LCD IGZO type LCD screen.
What does IGZO stand for?
I am not exactly sure. It's a new manufacturing process. There are new transistors inside. DisplayMate's tests say it's about 50% more power efficient than the previous generation.
So does that mean it needs less of a backlight, a less bright backlight, so more light gets through on each one, or does that mean that it's more power efficient on switching, or some combination of all those
combination of all those things, but mostly the backlight needs to be less intense.
So one of the things that happens when you change backlight LCD technology is that the image quality can change. For example, the classic example is the twisted pneumatic TN panels versus an IPS panel. The IPS panels had better viewing angles, better color reproduction, and a wider gamut. The TN panels were faster pixel change times. So there's pros and cons to both. Sometimes you want a higher pixel refresh rate, sometimes you want better color representation. Where does the new
because this is still technically a IPS LCD, you're going to get all the benefits of that. We're not talking about TN panel quality. It is, compared side to side, exactly the same quality-wise as the iPad 3 and 4. I have, of course, the 3 here. And what that means is that the color reproduction is fantastic.
So that means the range of colors that you can display and the brightnesses that you can show them are, nothing's changed.
It is a very, very wide range of colors, and not only is it a wide range of colors, it is color accurate.
So one of the things that you use to describe this is called the NTSC gamut, right? Which describes it's like a standard for the range of colors that can be displayed on a screen, and all of the Retina displays, as far as I'm aware, go beyond that gamut, right? They're 100% of the gamut.
It's not 100%. It is high 90s%. Some screens are better than others. If we want to jump to the screen is, like I said, almost exactly the same. It still looks like the optical bonding, so that's how close the actual LCD grid is bonded to that glass. The glass on the top is not as close as I'd like it to be.
So you can still see, if you look at the screen, you can still see a little tiny
And you're never going to be able to see
this
in this video.
Actually, you can. You look at the bottom right edge of the screen, there's a black gap between the edge of the image and the bezel, and that's what it is. You don't notice it on the black iPads.
And this black gap isn't a gap this way, like in terms of side by side.
Right.
It's a gap this way, but when you look at an angle, you see it horizontally.
Right. So the comparison is to say, like your phone, your HTC One, the screen is very close to the digitizer and the glass, so it looks more like a magazine surface, like a printed surface, in that the pixels seem like they're right on the bottom of the glass.
Right. So as opposed to
sunk.
This is glass and this is the LCD, as opposed to being right there, and not only is it very thin glass, maybe it's thicker glass, and also there's a little bit of a distance.
Not to scale.
and I think that's largely why they incorporated the parallax on iOS 7. So I think that hides the distance, having the parallax effect.
You mean the background moving, like the icons living on the surface?
So having these stars in the background of this wallpaper slightly shift as with the accelerometer, It's an effect that has given some people nausea, so you can actually disable that. I think that actually compensates for the depth, and that hides. Now they're saying depth is something that's good.
Hides their business.
So that's the weight and that's the screen. But let's talk about the big. I think what's even more important than the weight, because a pound is a good sweet spot for a two-handed tablet, but really the form factor, the form changing, is the bigger deal.
Shrinking in the bezel helps address the one. I mean, it helps address the one-handed nature of the device, because it's going to move the center of gravity closer to where you can hold it with your hand.
There are two big changes in the form. One, we'll start with the narrowing of the bezels. So if you see on the iPad 1, 2, and 3, the bezels are all the same size. Now they're about half as wide.
The side bezels, not the top. The top bezel's
just the
same,
side
right?
bezels. You can see right here.
You can just put it on top of the other one. There you go.
Right there it goes. While the screens are lined up, you're losing that much bezel space. Now what that means is, like you said, the density, the weight distribution has changed. So you're holding the screen, the actual LCD screen, closer to your hand to where you were reading or watching a video or browsing a web page. And there's still enough bezel to have your thumb here if you're holding it here. Because if there was no bezel, your thumb would be on the screen the whole time.
Well, so Apple also rolled out thumb detection
last year, yes,
with iOS 6 and the Mini. I assume that's included on the Air.
There is thumb detection. So as I put my thumb here, I can still browse, and it's not going to think that I have two touch points on
even
here.
though you have one hand very clearly on the screen.
You know, I can load up a photo, and if I use two fingers, I'm pinching, but I can still pan, and my thumb is like right on the screen. It's on there.
How far over can you move your thumb?
Like if I go fully on there, nope.
Still good.
Still good, but now it's thinking it's two finger.
So so one of the things I do with the Mini is I tend to hold it like this, just kind of resting, palm out, thumbs in.
Resting palm pose.
Resting palm, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Does that work?
No, it's a corner grip.
Okay.
It's a corner grip. It's a corner grip for both hands, even when it's in two-handed use, which is fine because of the narrowing bezel. Another benefit is that typing the keyboard. If I bring up, for example.
Oh, so you can use your thumbs to type like you would on your phone.
And my thumbs can comfortably overlap now.
That's great.
And so the TYGH areas on a keyboard are easy to hit.
So you don't have to do the palm and chording thing like you did.
You're never doing the chording thing, even though you can.
Right.
And in the movies, chording looks cool because you're typing real fast while holding.
If you get good at it, you can chord reasonably fast.
And another benefit to the narrowing bezel is if you're in, for example, a book, and I can load, or I'll just load this one. And of course, I have this locked.
Just finished Wool, eh?
It's narrow on the top and bottom, which, for some reason, for me mentally, that makes it easier to read.
Do you like? See, I don't like reading two-column on devices. I don't know if that may just be force of habit from years of using Kindles.
Love two-column. I hate reading a giant block of text like this. This looks like copying and pasting in Notepad. This looks like I'm reading a book.
So the giant wall of text on that, I would probably march the bezels in and space out the lines a little bit. But yeah, I get your point.
Then you wouldn't be buying a 9.7 inch
there you go.
device either. And then the other big thing with the form, since we talked about the bezel, is the shape of the bottom. So like the iPad Mini, which was introduced last year, you have more rounded corners here, and it gets flatter sooner.
So it doesn't rock like the old iPads?
So I'll show you an example. If you notice on the iPad 3, which was the same design as the iPad 2, it was a sharper slope here. It's still flat bottom, but it was a sharper slope here to give the illusion that it was thinner, to kind of hide that hump. But what that meant was that when you're gripping it here, it's sharper here, and it's not as comfortable.
It's a little hard on your
a little hard on your palm.
That's a minor complaint.
It is minor, but if you're holding it with one hand for long periods of time, then having the more rounded curve does make this easier to hold.
I mean, just to be clear, so I spent maybe an hour with this right when we first got it, and basically just went and laid on the couch and read a book for a little bit, watched some movies, watched some video, and it is a very comfortable device. It is a major improvement in comfort over the previous generations of iPad, I think. I mean, it's the closest thing that they've done to a 7-inch tablet so far, and with a 9.7-inch screen.
They don't have a 7-inch tablet.
No.
They have a 7.9 and 9.7. Right. A lot of people say it's, and I would agree that it is optimally a two-handed device, but I still think that you can use this with one hand, and as all I need to do is rest this part of my hand on my knee, on a table, and I can read and type and browse for at least an hour.
Okay.
And like, you wouldn't want to hold this out like that for 2 hours. No, like, that's still a pound.
So the problem I have holding the larger tablets with one hand isn't in finger strength or anything like that. It's that if you have any kind of RSI problems or anything like that, that starts to get real wobbly after a very short period of time when you're supporting that weight balance. This one was much better, but you shouldn't hold it.
And you shouldn't hold anything out. Weight in your hand, even if it's half a pound.
Paperback book is the limit.
For more than an hour. Yeah. Even a paperback book, you're going to be resting it, you're going to be distributing the weight.
You move it around.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, common sense.
Okay, so do you want to talk about A7 next? This is a big change.
So we talk about weight, talk about form, and the third big change is the processor. And it's not just that it's the A7 that's the big change, because we talked about that with the iPhone 5S, but the fact that Apple didn't revise the A7 for the iPad.
So previously, the X versions of the processors, which showed up in tablets versus phones, had a higher clock speed and more graphics cores, basically.
So for example, the iPad 2 has an A4X, as opposed to, while the corresponding iPhone 4 had the A4. Right. The iPad 3 has A5X, the iPad 4th gen has A6X. This is just an A7.
So part of those changes were because they needed more graphics power for the additional pixels on the screen. Part of it was that they had more battery and thus more theoretically thermal bandwidth to crank up the clock speeds. Why did they just use the same A7 on the tablet and the phone?
A7 honestly was good enough. Now it is not exactly the same A7. It's a 100 megahertz difference.
Okay.
They bump up the clock speed to 1.4 gigahertz. It's a dual core chip. If you told someone who just looked at speeds and feeds that this is a 1.4 gigahertz dual core inside this tablet with one gigabytes of system memory, they would say that sucks.
That's impossible.
I mean, I have a phone that's quad core or 2.3 gigahertz.
Right.
And with 2 gigs of memory, but it's all about how the architecture of the chip and how the OS is using that chip. And the A7, as well as the previous A processors from Apple, are all engineered in-house. So
they're custom chips. It's not like they're taking a Snapdragon from Qualcomm. And
it's a licensing of the ARM architecture,
right.
But even so, they're manipulating that architecture for their own. So it's not a straight-up A15 or Cortex A15 chip inside here.
At least not since the early iPhones and first iPad.
Yeah, I mean the first iPhones and the first iPads were co-made by Samsung, and they were very close to the
Hummingbird or whatever Samsung's.
So what's in here is the A7 has, and if you look at people who are more technical than us who go in depth with the chip design, there's 4 megabytes of system memory outside the 1 gigabytes of system memory, a chip memory,
of cache,
of SRAM, and so you have way faster memory that the iOS can store on that, temporarily loading things up quicker. And if you want to get into the instruction level, the 1.4 gigahertz, which is good because that's low thermals, because you're talking only cycling the clocks 1,400 times a second. How wide those clocks are, how many instructions you can run per clock, is much more robust than you get previously.
So it's more parallel even outside of the dual core.
Yes.
Each core is more parallel than a traditional ARM CPU.
Each clock
is what Anand came up with.
Yeah. So I think he said basically it is almost twice the width of the previous generation iPads.
One of the other things that they did with A7 was reduce the penalty for state changes. This is one of the things that's plagued. Like if you look all the way back to PC CPUs from 15 years ago, with the introduction of MMX and those kinds of massively parallel computing, integer and floating point computing stuff, like there's always a state change penalty, and typically that can be 2 or 3 clock cycles between switching from integer math to floating point math, which actually matters in the real world. That is, shaving that stuff down is a performance change that matters in the real world.
And the real world
they've done that stuff too.
Is what's important. So what does that mean to you? To you out there, if you have an iPad 3 or an iPad 4, and you want to know on day to day what the differences are. Well, I think that unless you do a direct comparison, you're not going to notice the difference.
So the place I noticed with the iPad mini with Retina and the iPhone 5S, which just to be clear, have the exact same A7 processor, they're the same clock speed and everything, is game load times. Like if you're looking at games like XCOM and KOTOR and those types of the ported games that have lots of assets and lots of math has to happen when you start every time, that stuff happens like 10 seconds faster in some cases. A massive speed boost.
So as Apple likes to say, it's time for a demo. And we'll do some quick comparisons right now.
Did you just channel Tim Cook in our video?
Well, it is time for a demo. Apple UI, the springboard has always been fast. So if you look at the springboards here, I have the iPad 3, which is technically 2 generations slower than the Air. This is an A5X, this is an A7, because we never bought the iPad 4. You know, springboard is just as fast. I mean, going your everyday browsing through your apps and even loading, I had Safari loading. See that difference? It was the delay in the pop-up more than the actual loading. I'm going to hit the home button, and I'm just going to load test it again. So, like your normal browsing, this is, you can't notice a difference. The thing, and there is a difference, and I'll show you the difference. Yeah, okay. But when I hit the home buttons, home at the exact same time, you'll see that the iPad Air, the delay between when the animation starts and when it finishes is shorter, but the actual animation time is exactly the same. So I'm gonna hit it here. 1, 2, 3, go.
Look exactly the same to me.
Almost exactly the same.
We could put the high speed on that and probably see a difference. Now, actually loading web pages, though, seems like the performance of the browser when you're browsing seem to be. It's just, also actually the 3. You might not be able to see this on camera. It's a little frame ratier. Like there's a little bit of a chunk as you're doing the scroll. That you're not seeing on the Air. And
we'll do a page load, and that's going to be dependent on Wi-Fi. So this is a dual band 802N Wi-Fi. It's the fastest you're going to get outside of AC, which I don't think is relevant right now.
It's not really real yet.
But if you're going to buy this to be future-proof, and you're planning on buying an AC router in a year, then that's something to consider. You might want to wait if AC really is something that you're going to care about. Yeah, web page loads, yes, slightly faster, but again, without doing direct comparisons, it's not something that, unless you would use this for a whole year and went back to the 3, that you would notice. When apps are cached, for example, I think I had Twitter up before we started this video. Yeah, so that's the delay. That's the delay I'm talking about.
It's a half a second. It's not anything major.
Right, but when apps aren't loaded, for example, Facebook I didn't have loaded, and they're going to load from scratch, that's when you're going to get the biggest difference. So they're both loading,
5 seconds.
loading.
This is unacceptable.
And it's still...
Oh, that's terrible.
And they're the same versions of both. There goes the big difference when apps aren't cached. I'm going to do a demo XCOM, because that's a graphically intensive app. And that's where we saw a huge difference in loading times.
Do you want me to bust the mini out at the same time so you can see the difference on the...
And so I load these both exactly the same time. It goes through a bunch of animations.
Well, the thing about this game, though, is that there's an opening movie that on older devices you can't skip until you reach a certain point, until it's loaded all the stuff in the background. On the A7, that happens almost immediately. On the A5, A5X, that happens, takes much longer. So start tapping both. See, you're able to skip it immediately. It'll be another 45 seconds before you can skip it on the older iPad, which really sucks. So
still loading in the background.
Yeah, it'll keep going.
Yep.
There you go. Well, you exited out. What about the motion coprocessor? Is it in the Air?
It is in the Air. Okay. So there's the motion coprocessor. There aren't iPad-specific tablet or apps yet.
I gotta imagine it's going to be less useful for the iPad than it will be for your phone.
Much less useful. I mean, on the iPhone 5S, which there aren't even that many apps yet that you employ it, it's going to be more useful here. Less so much. And we've talked about iOS 7, so it has all the same flourishes that you get with iOS 7. You do get all the iLife apps now also, because Apple is giving those away with new iOS devices.
The last thing I'll say on the performance stuff is that I found on the slower devices, the big games like XCOM and KOTOR, the load times were so bad that you didn't want to play them. And I've been playing KOTOR on my iPad mini, which is not a bad experience.
And the other thing, we talked about battery earlier. Battery life, it really depends again on how you use this. So if you want to do a battery rundown and just drain the life and just nonstop browse the web and watch video, it's about 11 hours.
Okay. And that's not using 3D stuff, not using games and stuff.
That's
like
not games. Okay. No, definitely not using games. If you are a regular, normal user, email in the mornings, web pages in the mornings, reading at night, you don't need to charge this. I mean, it's just like the 3. once every 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
The bigger difference, though, is the charging time. Because it is a lower capacity battery, 32 watt hours as opposed to 42 watt hours, the amount of time it takes to charge this to get to that 90% until it starts slowing down is only about 3 hours.
Oh, that's not bad.
As opposed to on here, which is about 5 hours.
So is that using the same brick? Because Apple has stealth updated the bricks.
It is the 12 watt brick.
Okay, it's the 12 watt brick.
It is a new 12 watt brick that was included with iPad 4th generation.
Okay.
Which is the big fat one.
It's the same. It looks the same as all of them, but you can look and see what the model number is. So if you get a new iPad, make sure you mark the good one rather than the other ones.
I didn't get the LTE version. This is the Wi-Fi version, which is because I want to get it as thin as possible.
Well, and as fast as possible.
And as fast as possible. There is the LTE version, which works with all carriers, no matter which one you buy. When you go in stores, you tell them, I want the AT&T SIM, and then they'll give you the AT&T SIM one, but you can really put a, Verizon
Oh, so they're not locked?
They're not locked.
Oh, that's great. Well, you're paying full price.
You are paying, absolutely. And then it does work as a hotspot.
Is the LTE one actually thicker? I thought it was just heavier.
It is slightly thicker.
Oh, really? And does it have this? Have you seen it? Does it have the same band on the back?
I actually haven't seen it in person yet. But I would imagine it needs a radio on the back.
Well, I mean, it has to have some sort of transparent place for the radio. I just am interested to see how they disguise it.
So now I want to talk about the smart cover. Because it is a new form, you can't use the old smart cover.
It's too big.
This is the leather one. I really like this one. This one worked with the 2.
And the 3. And the 4.
And the 3, it's a snap around the bottom, has this metal hinge. The metal hinge is the part I really like.
So a lot of people didn't like the metal hinge because it kind of scuffs up the side where the magnets click on.
It does, and the hinge itself gets scuffed. I'll show you the scuffing. Actually, if you can see, you see it right there?
Yeah.
Right there. That is because of using the hinge for a year.
Minus resale value, Norm.
Yep, absolutely. You can't get much for an iPad 3 anyway.
Okay, but the neat thing about this cover was the way it folded open.
So it had 4 panes.
4 panes.
Of different widths.
Yeah.
It still did not, at least when I bought it, there was no, there's a magnet here, which I thought was okay, but there is no magnet on the bottom. So this floppy.
So it flops,
just flops like that.
It kind of holds, but it's not reliable.
No. So the way you hold it when you use the cover was to fold it. I fold it halfway.
Oh, I usually just pop it off.
Or you pop it off, sure.
But then you can also fold it into a stand if you wanted, which was.
And there's a right way and a wrong way to fold in the stand.
Yes.
And you want to fold it inward for increased structural stability.
You want the soft stuff out so the magnets are on the right way.
Yep. And so this is a stand. Now the new cover, pay an extra $40, another $40.
Yep.
Doesn't have that metal hinge. So it's just covered with the urethane.
This is a big iPad mini design. This is the same design that they released with the iPad mini last year.
Yep. Only urethane.
Yes.
For the cover.
In order to get
if you want leather, you need the fat.
You have to buy the dumb thing.
The case, which here it is for the iPad mini, which is a cover with a case. Covers. I mean, it protects the back too. I don't like this. I don't like the case.
It adds too much weight to the device.
Yeah,
it's too bulky.
If you're emphasizing weight and thickness, then having a full case like that is not worth it. Unless
and
you're clumsy.
If you want to have a case that covers the back, you can actually get something that's much better for a lot less than the $60 or $70 that they charge for this. That's like polycarb and looks good.
So speaking of this cover, though,
so how does it?
So once again, it magnetizes on the top, which is okay, but you can see it's already loosening. I don't think it's strong enough. And especially when you fold it back, I had to actually refold it. The lip actually holds up a little bit like that. It's much better now because I actually aggressively turn it back this way. But if you fold it back like for a day out, then it will pop up a little bit, which I don't like.
I wish I had brought my old smart cover for the Mini, because the problem I have with this is that it doesn't actually fold. It doesn't actually hold the stand very well.
I'll show the holding stand. So the other thing is that now there's a magnet on this side, so theoretically it'll hold, but
is it the same?
I can feel it. You hear that? That's snapping in.
I don't think that's. I think that's the front magnet just coming through.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's poor design.
Well, you hold it with the right hand, and then it solves the problem. Come on, Norm.
I left-handed because I'm cording with right hand.
Okay.
Like I want this to stick up. That's just poor design. And of course, you can still use it as a stand. So it only folds 3 times now.
Yeah. This is where the whole thing breaks down.
Well,
at least on the Mini,
it leans further back, which I think is good.
That's probably
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't type like this. I hate using the on-screen keyboard.
I use that with a real keyboard.
Yes.
If you bring a Bluetooth keyboard with me and use that,
then you can absolutely use this or to watch movies.
Like if I'm sitting on an airplane, you watch a movie on the thing. The other neat trick I've done with either cover is that you can dangle the thing on the seat in front of you. and on an airplane, and kind of slot it in behind the tray, the seat back tray.
That's precarious. I think
it's a little risky, but it's nice. Like, it's the right height.
I'm gonna do a little.
It's pretty sturdy on the Mini.
It's pretty sturdy.
Yeah. It's $40. It's kind of expensive.
I wouldn't buy it.
I don't recommend buying any of the Apple cases.
I absolutely do not recommend buying it.
I wish if they made the polyurethane one, the smart cover in leather, I would say that it's a little bit different story, but because it has to be the polyurethane, I'm not into it.
Leather or bust.
Also, those polyurethane covers, I'll bring my Mini when we do the Mini video next week. They age really, really badly.
Yeah.
They are, like my blue one from it's a year old. I'm not a filthy person, and it looks like it has been used by small children that have a lot of grubby hands and food all the time.
Last few things to mention. There's a dual mic on the back, one for noise canceling.
For FaceTime and stuff like that,
For FaceTime. FaceTime is something I want to talk about. There's 5-megapixel camera on the back, 1.2 in the front, which is exactly the same as in the new Retina Mini. They haven't improved that year to year.
And it's the iPhone 4S 5-pixel camera, or the
4S.
iPhone 5, something like that. It's got to be.
Yeah, it's 4S.
It's a couple of generations back on the phone.
And then I'm going to dial you right now with FaceTime.
Does that mean that you can take okay pictures on your tablet now?
Sure. Actually, I'm going to turn off the audio so we don't get feedback.
That's probably a good idea.
This is actually a good demo of this camera because you're using the iPad Mini with Retina, which has the exact same camera. And so what you're seeing here is what this camera would see.
Flip it around. Give me the back camera.
My goodness.
No. Flip the camera around.
Hold on. You're doing something crazy.
I want to do something dumb.
Not really working.
Oh, it's not dumb enough.
No.
It's the wrong
only
way.
On your screen.
It's dumb on my screen, but not on your screen. Oh, well, speed of light. Okay, that's enough dumb.
You can take photos with this. No one's going to stop you from taking photos with this. What I found the camera useful for actually was photogrammetry. So something like 123D.
Oh, capturing 3D model stuff.
Holding the camera like this, or the iPad like this to take a 3D model.
To take photos, the 50 perspective shots.
To take 40 shots is much easier using a tablet, which can be the same. So you could say the same with the Retina than it is with the phone.
Yeah.
So totally useful for photogrammetry.
I like using the iPad for FaceTime. I use FaceTime to let the grandparents see my daughter. And it's great because my daughter can actually see the people on the screen, whereas with the phone, she's just interested in jamming it in her mouth.
Exactly. So that's basically everything there is to say. We have to say about the new iPad Air. The pricing model is exactly the same as previous generation. 16 gig is $500. That's the base price. It's the cheapest you can get it at.
It's $100 more for each step up on memory,
which is
up to 128 gigs.
I mean, you're paying $100 for another 16 gigs, $100 then for 32, and then $100 for another 64.
So what you're saying is each $100 becomes a better deal.
Yes, or the first $100 is the worst deal in the world.
Yeah, the first $100 for 16 gigs of flash memory is insane at this point. It's $130 extra.
And I don't think you can buy an iPad Air and just get the 16 gig version. Of that, you have 12 gigs usable, and that's not going to be enough. So unless everything you use is on the cloud.
If you're using the iPad for web browsing and Twitter and reading books, it's probably okay.
Then you're paying $500 for something that you don't need.
For a Kindle,
for a Kindle.
Yeah.
For Nexus 7.
If you start installing apps or games at all on an iPad Air, you're going to run out of space really quickly. XCOM is 2 gigs.
Yep. If you're making
gigs. It's insane. It's huge.
Of the App Store, which is the whole point of being in the iOS ecosystem.
Yes.
If you're taking advantage of that, then you're going to want at least 32 gigs, which is really unfortunate, really shitty that Apple charges $100 for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we very soon the base model has to be the 32 gig one, and it has to be $100 off. Which they're never going to do. It'll be $25 off or $50 off for the 16 gig version.
Or I mean, starting at 32 gigs is the right thing to do.
I mean, that's
that was what they did with phones.
When the iPad was new 4 years ago, 16 gigs of memory was kind of expensive. It was still a ripoff, but at least it was closer to that gap. Now it's just insane that that's set. It's actually $130 more to add the LTE modem, right?
Add the LTE modem, which that is up to you. I mean, the cheapest you can get data for is like about $20 a month.
Right.
Or add 10, 15 if you're on a shared plan.
Yeah, if you're on a family plan, it's $10 to add a tablet, I think, on most of the carriers. I find, like, I'm on Verizon, I have tethering. I've never needed LTE beyond the tethering. The only benefit of using the iPad is that it has massive battery, so you can do a 24-hour hotspot.
Yeah. I
right?
would not pay for, if you're on iOS, of course, if you're on Android, you don't need to pay for hotspot. If you're on iOS, don't pay for the tethering on your phone, pay for the tethering on your iPad, pay for the data on your iPad.
Well, except unless you're on a carrier. Like, if you're on Verizon, you have an LTE phone, then they have to give you tethering for free.
Sure.
Don't pay for tethering. That is good advice.
Don't pay for tethering on a phone.
Yeah.
So, should you buy the iPad Air? Should anyone buy the iPad Air? Let's go. Let's talk about the scenarios. So,
okay. Hey, Norm, I don't have a tablet at all.
You don't have a tablet?
Is the iPad Air right for me? I like to read and watch movies, and my name is Will Smith.
How much money do you have?
I have all the money that I can. I have
all the money in the world. Then
I just bought an Xbox One and a PS4, and I have a Wii U.
If you have all the money in the world,
okay,
go ahead, buy the iPad Air. It is the best full-size tablet that you can buy right now.
What if I am an iOS user and I only have $500? Should I buy an iPad Air?
Well, if you're an iOS user, for example, if you have an iPad 4,
yeah,
don't buy the iPad Air.
Okay. What if you have an iPad 3?
Like, I have iPad 3?
Yeah.
I would not buy the iPad Air.
You use your iPad for photo stuff a little bit, mostly reading, web browsing, email, that
Definitely
kind of stuff.
Web browsing. I would not buy the iPad Air if I had the iPad.
So if you have an iPad, is there a scenario you can see with an iPad 3 or 4, a Retina iPad, that it's worth upgrading to the Air?
Yes. If you had an iPad 3 and you bought the base model, the 16 gig Wi-Fi, and you want LTE on a full for full size
or you
iPad,
need space,
and you need capacity, then buy the iPad Air. Get rid of your 16 gig and upgrade to LTE and get 32 or 64.
Okay.
If you have 64 and LTE, which means you paid $850, $830 plus tax for this a year and a half ago, don't spend another $830 on this just to get parity with your features.
I think that is eminently good advice. What if you're an Android phone user?
Well, if you have iPad 2.
Oh.
If you have iPad 2, go ahead, upgrade to the iPad Air.
Retina is a big jump. A7's a big jump.
It's going to be lighter.
The size is comparable.
It is in every way possible a better tablet than the 2.
And what if you're an iPad 1 user? You're on like iOS 5 something now, right?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm on iOS on iPad Air or iPad or OG. Oh, I have an update.
Congratulations, Norm. What's the update?
I'm not going to update.
Well, just show us what it is. It's like 5.0.3, I think.
Oh, I don't even know where this. I'm at 5.01.
Okay, so you can go. I think if you go back to general, go back one, and then it'll be update.
Yep.
Yeah,
software update.
This is riveting TV.
5.1.
Yeah. Okay, so if you're an OG iPad user, you use your iPad a ton. The Air is a huge upgrade.
Go buy it.
But so then the question then becomes, if you're into the, we'll talk about Android users in a minute because this doesn't make sense for everybody. But and we'll do a whole video for the Mini next week or maybe
Mini
the week
with
after.
Retina.
Mini with Retina. At what point do you think, should I buy a Mini or should I buy a Mini with Retina or an iPad Air? Because it's a third of a pound difference basically.
Same thickness.
Yeah.
And the screen, all you're losing is third pound is the screen size.
Right, but the pixel density is the same. I mean, the resolution is the same. The pixel density is actually better on the Mini with Retina because the screen's smaller.
326 on the Mini with Retina,
and it's $100 cheaper.
Yeah. Get the Air if you're a photographer.
So if you want to look at the pictures big.
If you want to look at the pictures not only bigger but in better color.
You think the new panel actually makes that? Because the Mini with Retina seems to be the iPhone 5S panel, the same as the iPhone 5S panel.
Yeah. From other people's tests, and we'll talk about this when we do the Mini with Retina. Right. The color, the gamut on the Mini with Retina is not as good.
I don't think Ray Sonora from DisplayMate has done Mini tests yet.
Not
Mini
yet,
with Retina tests, but they'll be coming. Yeah. And we'll definitely talk about that when we do the Mini video. I love, I use my tablet primarily for reading. I love the palmable nature of this thing, and you still can't quite do that with the Air just because the distribution of the weight is out this much further.
If you're in a meeting and you need to use this as a PowerPoint display device, Air is better than the Mini.
Yeah, well, except for no PowerPoint on Keynote. I think.
Sure, Keynote. So if you are an Android user,
you're an Android phone user. Have you bought a tablet yet?
Yeah, you have Nexus 7.
Okay.
If you love Android, you should have the new Nexus 7.
Okay.
That is a great tablet.
It's a really nice for
$230.
Yeah.
And
it's 32 gigs by default, right? That's great. Or is it 16 gigs by default?
You don't need the iPad Air. Okay. Don't switch iOS. Stick with Nexus 7. It's unfortunate that Nexus 10 isn't that great. At this point, it does have that crazy high resolution screen, but I think
everything else is crappy on the Nexus. It's last year's model still.
Well,
are they going to update that, or is it going to be the Nexus 10 forever?
No, I think they'll update it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about if you play games and you're an iOS? Like if you're an iOS guy, you're with an iPhone, iPad 3 or iPad 2. Does it make sense to upgrade to play games? I guess it depends on the games.
Does it make sense to spend let's say you can get rid of the iPad 3 for $150?
Yeah.
That's concerning.
You can go to Target and get $200 for it.
$200
yeah.
for it. You're paying $300 plus, at least $300.
Plus another $100 for each step
to
up.
play XCOM.
Okay.
Not worth it.
You could just play it on your Xbox.
Play it on your PC or Xbox.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think that's it. I think that's all of our scenarios. It's a really nice tablet. If you've never bought a tablet, I think the Air is a good upgrade, but I would start with the Mini. Don't you think?
Look how light it is. I'm flying.
If you were starting with a tablet for the first time, would you buy a Mini or an Air first?
To be determined.
Okay.
I'm not ready to talk about. I'm not ready to make a decision on that yet.
Okay. So that's it. We'll be back with more iPads soon.
Yeah.
The Air is really good.
It's a holiday of tablets.
Decide based on how much you want your iPad to weigh is the takeaway, I guess.
And whether you want to use iOS.
Whether you want to use iOS at all. We'll be back with more from Tested real soon. Check us out on Tested.com. I'm Will.
I'm Norm.
See you guys later.
Bye.